I mean, a bunch of, let's face it, old white dudes in southern and northern Ontario capitalizing on a long dead Indigenous artists in order to line their own pockets. It's terrible. It's cultural appropriation. It's fraud. It's theft.
Welcome back to another week of Closer Look here across the Village Media Network with Michael Friscolanti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Another weekend come and gone. The snow, funny thing, Sunday, this is so Canadian. I'm out raking leaves with my leaf blower as it's snowing. The only thing I was missing was a Tim Hortons coffee in my hand.
You're blowing leaves while it was snowing?
Well, I had a few to get up, right? Because, they're blowing all over the neighborhood.
You hadn't finished?
I've done it like 15 times. I've spent more time this year on my yard and leaves than I think I ever have.
Why is that, do you think? Just
I don't know.
Because there's so many leaves or just nothing better to do?
They seem to blow differently this year.
Really?
I'd have it done, big windstorm,
Interesting.
front lawn covered again.
Did you find time to watch the Grey Cup on Sunday?
You know what? I almost forgot that the CFL is still in existence.
Really?
That's how disinterested I am
Really?
in football, Canadian football.
Yeah. I still, from the Hammer, we still follow the
course,
Ticats. The
yeah.
kids are big Ticats fans. A lot of friends and family still have season tickets to the Ticats. They lost in the Eastern Final
Right, yeah.
the week before. I did not tune in, but I think I was happy that Saskatchewan had won.
Yeah.
They've only won a few times, and they have a great, rabid fan base.
Huge.
Right? So
I do know that.
Congrats to the Rough Riders.
Rough game for Prime Minister Carney. Every time he was on screen, I read that TSN had to mute the audio feed.
Oh, really?
Because he was being booed so badly.
Oh, because the headline I'd seen was there were some boos and cheers mixed in, but no.
Just telling you what I read.
That's just the football trend, right? Were they doing as bad as Trump with giving them the finger and everything?
Oof, I didn't see
Well, where
any
was
of
the
that.
game? It was in Winnipeg, right?
It was.
Interesting.
In the Peg.
In the Peg, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually if we could have a Grey Cup every day for a week in different cities and see what the reaction would be, depending on which part of the country he's in.
No kidding. Could be a good test.
I don't think it's happening.
Okay, what is happening is something very cool at the Trillium that started earlier today. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we launched it today, a crowdfunding campaign. It's the first time we've ever asked people to help us
Subsidize our salaries.
contribute.
No, it's not that?
No, we're contributing to the Trillium's ongoing investigation into the Skills Development Fund.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of you have read about this in your local sites. Their coverage has been running all over the chain. You've heard us talk about it here on the podcast.
Yeah.
The Skills Development Fund is the Ford government's kind of signature training program. It's given out $2.5 billion. And we had members of the Trillium team on a few weeks back talking about what they've uncovered about this fund,
Right.
who it's going to, raising a lot of questions. Of course, the opposition politicians have dubbed it a slush fund, Ford government slush fund. It began with FOI requests, getting a lot of details about who was getting this money. And now they're following up with more FOI requests. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me. I should, but this is in the thousands of dollars. So for those who don't know, a Freedom of Information request is to request documents that are publicly available but not typically published.
Right.
So you can request these things, and any member of the public can do it. But typically it's researchers, journalists do these kind of things to uncover internal documents, memos, emails, reports, data, things like that. Mm-hmm. The Trillium does this kind of FOI work all the time.
Right.
They produce a lot of great journalism because of it. In this case, but the reality is there's costs associated because the government come back and say, yes, we'll give you these documents, but it's going to cost us this much money and manpower and time to get these documents.
And can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Can they set that price based on how readily available
Yeah.
they want a certain document?
I think there's all kinds of different things that go into it.
Okay.
I often wonder sometimes if they want to make the price really high, they don't want you to pay and get it. So some of these requests are in the thousands of dollars. I think the total bill for the next round of requests that Trillium's made is almost $11,000. Wow. So basically, the team there came up with a good idea. Let's ask readers if they want to help us pay for this.
For sure, yeah.
We are completely our local chain of sites is completely free to read. Everybody can log on free of charge. Always will, always have, and always will. But we do sometimes ask our readers to voluntarily contribute to the work we do. If you like the work we do, help us out. In this case, we're specifically asking to help us uncover these documents, to help us pay for these. We've put the deposits on the first round of these requests, and we're asking the public to donate. So we ran a story on the Trillium. We ran a story across the chain. It links back to the crowdfunding page that we've got going. I'm sure you've already donated.
Yes,
the maximum amount.
I will be for sure.
The maximum amount. So we'll see what happens. interesting alone just on that,
Yeah.
just doing that. So we're also this week gonna have some of the team come on and talk about not only the crowdfunding campaign, but the great work they've done since the last time.
It's been amazing.
It's fascinating to watch. So stay tuned for that.
I love the pick. They ran a story on the Skills Development Fund in the last few days, and the image of Minister Piccini sitting all slumped over in his chair like he's kicking a pop can through the legislature. It tells a wonderful story.
Yeah, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back because I'm not the one doing the work, but I will give great credit to the team at the Trillium, because what happens a lot in political reporting is if you do great work, it gets brought up, it becomes the leading thing in question period.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened with their reporting on this. It seems like every day it's leading question period at the provincial legislature. Opposition parties are grilling them, quoting the reporting that the Trillium's doing. So it's been fascinating to watch. So we'll see if, who knows, maybe by the time this podcast airs tonight, we'll already have raised all the money we need.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic.
Then you wouldn't have to give anything.
So I'll hold off just a little bit just to see what happens.
You'll wait till tomorrow morning.
All right. The easy segue would be speaking of fraud, but that's just, that's just too simple, so I won't do that. But we are going to talk about fraud today on the show.
Yes, yeah. Renowned Indigenous painter Norval Morrisseau.
Yes.
This has been a years-long saga.
It has.
Right? We're going to talk about this, but even before he passed away in 2007, he had been pointing out the fact that people are ripping off his work and there's fakes.
Right.
It actually ended up being a documentary released a bunch of years ago that kind of started the police investigation. We kind of hit the final chapter the other day in Barrie, where the last of the suspects who were charged years ago was in court to find out whether he was going to be found guilty or not guilty. We'll leave you hanging on the cliffhangers. We're going to talk to Peter Robinson, our great court reporter in Barrie for BarrieToday. He was there covering it, snapping photographs of all these people over the last few months as they've walked back and forth from court. He's going to give us all the details.
It was one of the biggest art frauds in Canadian history. Thousands of fake pieces bearing the signature of renowned Indigenous painter Norval Morrisseau. Last week in a Barrie courtroom, a jury delivered the last chapter in the years-long saga. Guilty verdicts against a man named Jeff Cowan, the final suspect facing criminal charges in connection with the high-profile case. Here to break it all down, the whole story, is BarrieToday court reporter Peter Robinson. Peter, good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Happy to be here.
All right, let's dive right in, Peter, and start by reminding our listeners who Norval Morrisseau was.
Yeah, generally regarded as Canada's most acclaimed contemporary Indigenous artist. He died in 2007, and sadly, his legacy has been tarnished by the massive amount of fraudulent fake art in his name that was taking place actually while he was still alive, but especially since he passed away.
For sure. And if I've been reading about this for years, like a lot of people. If I remember right, he was actually sort of complaining about this before he died, that people were ripping him off, that there were fakes. But it wasn't until this big documentary, I think 2019, There Are No Fakes, which actually featured the keyboardist from the Bare Naked Ladies. Right. So what happened with it? Well, what did this documentary? See, I'm struggling too. What did this documentary expose, and sort of what happened from there, Peter?
I think it just dove into the fact that just how extensive it was. It literally is thousands, although the trial that I was covering actually only covered a little under 1,000 pieces. But and like good reporting often does, it prompted an investigation, and that led to the charges of 2 loosely affiliated fraud rings. One is based mostly in Southern Ontario, and the other one based around Thunder Bay.
So, Peter, major arrests announced back in 2023. Who was arrested, and what were the allegations?
So there was, I believe, 8 people. It might have been actually 9, but 8 ended up facing charges. 3 ended up being withdrawn, and then 5 people went to trial. 2 people pled in Thunder Bay, got 5-year terms, and then the cases that I covered took place down here. 2 lesser figures took plea deals and testified at Jeff Cowan's trial. They got 2 elderly men who got house arrest, and then Jeff Cowan was basically chose to take his to trial, and he was sort of the signature trial, if you will, of the Southern Ontario ring. And as you say, it all ended last week in a Barrie courtroom.
Okay, so let's talk about the Cowan trial. What was his role in all of this?
So he was accused of supplying significant amounts of art that was essentially of dubious provenance. And whether he knew it was fake or ought to have known was never really determined. But it was certainly proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he didn't do enough to confirm its authenticity. In fact, both him and a man named Jim White, who is from the local area here, and another man named Paul Bremner, went out of their way to create the appearance as though they were authentic. And that was really what secured the convictions. And in the case of the first two I mentioned, they were plea deals. And then with Cowan, it was a guilty verdict by jury.
And what kind of evidence were we talking about, Peter? Like, was the Crown going through, like, explaining to the jury why this painting was fake, why that painting was fake?
Well, it's, as you guys probably know, maybe our listeners don't, fraud trials are not the most exciting things in the world.
Thank you for pointing that out. It's very accurate.
The Crown did a very good job at going through mountains of evidence. And basically what it came down to is the Crown proved beyond a reasonable doubt that many of these paintings could not have been from the hand of Morrisseau. In other words, the canvas was after he died, or it was didn't exist in line with when the signature was dated, or the signatures were off, and just generally mountains of circumstantial evidence about how these guys basically concocted a scheme to sell art that they knew or ought to have known to unwitting buyers. And just some of the art sold for a few or several $100s up to tens of thousands of dollars. So you're not talking small amounts of money here.
Actually, I'll skip to that question because that was on my mind. Do we know, like, the extent of how much money was made on these fakes? We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. We just don't know.
There was numbers kicked around in court, and I'll be honest, I wasn't in court every day, so I can't absolutely affirm this fact. But there was evidence introduced in the trial that I just covered that something in the neighborhood of $400,000 that was exchanged between Mr. Cowan and Mr. White. So, you know, some of those, it should be said, some of that art may well have been authentic, and Cowan tried to make that point in his closing address. So I don't think anybody really knows. The Crown got a good result given how confusing the evidence was.
And what was his defense, Peter?
Well, his defense ought to have been that the Crown didn't do enough to meet reasonable doubt. But I think where he got himself, he was defending himself, by the way, where he got himself into trouble was he said, it's impossible to prove that some Morrisseau paintings are authentic. So in effect, what he was telling the jury was, I didn't know they were authentic, but I still sold them. Whereas he thought he was creating reasonable doubt, I think, in the jury's mind. And Mr. Bremner, who was the one of the guys that took a plea deal, after much back and forth, finally admitted in his role was to provide essentially dubious certificates of authenticity. He basically admitted once he got up on the stand after much toing and froing that he just didn't do enough to confirm their authenticity.
Just from your coverage, Mr. Cowan's an interesting guy. I think at one point he's in the hallway, he told you that he's going to turn the Crown's case on its head or something like that.
Flip the script.
I misquoted you. That's right. You obviously got to know him through covering this trial. What can you tell us about him, the person?
Well, I mean, a lot of people who cover the courts will tell you this of these types of nonviolent crimes. I mean, I liked all three guys that I covered, but that's kind of the point. You don't become a fraudster by having an edgy, unconvincing personality. Mm-hmm. I can totally envision people falling for all three guys saying that, what they were selling was authentic. Mm-hmm. I don't want to disparage. I mean, maybe he got in too deep and had to keep the fraud going, and he's going to pay a pretty hefty price. The sentencing is going to looks like it's going to set a date in December. Mm-hmm. I don't really want to pile on what the guy's dealing with here, but he's just the classic fraudster who used a charming personality. And I said in one of my stories, and it got edited out, we might use it at sentencing, that he was the classic person that seemed to exist within an alternative reality. In other words, he kind of convinced himself, perhaps, that what he was doing was legitimate when, the only people's opinion that mattered was the jury, when the jury clearly said it did not. So
he didn't try to sell you any paintings in the hallway or anything like that.
No, but there is he shall remain nameless, but there is a village media staffer who bought one. So, and I asked him as the jury was out, we were at a company lunch, the Community Builders Award here. And I said, so you still have the painting? He goes, I'm keeping it. It's actually good. So, it's just not done by Morrisseau.
Wow. But he obviously bought her. She bought it thinking it was a Morrisseau.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's unbelievable. You know, Peter, as someone who's covered lots of trials as well, you do going to get lost in them, and it's a fascinating day's work. Like you said, sometimes it could be nauseating, and you get stuck there staring at them talk about facts and figures all day. But there's nothing quite like covering a case like this, is there?
Yeah, especially since you know how much widespread interest. Like from what I understand, people have known about this for 25 years. And it was all kind of coming together in this empty courtroom in Barrie, Ontario. And the only reason why I was in Barrie was it seemed to be the most logical place to charge and try somebody because one of the guys happened to be from the area. So, and by the way, the courtroom did not have Wi-Fi, which made it also more interesting. So, anyway, that's beside the point. But you've got to be plugged in, and I don't want to say you feel history unfolding. That would be way too much of an exaggeration. But I will say, as one of the final points I would make, is this country desperately needs a dedicated body to try and confirm whether art that is circulating in the public spheres, whether it's galleries or even online, I mean, we got to do a better job at confirming authenticity, because it's a horrible way to be ripped off. And it's just, I mean, a lot of these artists are long dead. They can't do anything about it. And it's just really, at the end of the day, it's sad.
Peter, I think you mentioned sentencing next month. How much jail time is the prosecution looking for?
Well, the two guys in North Bay, by pleading guilty, got 5 years. As I understand it, their actions were a little bit more egregious, but they also pled guilty, whereas Mr. Cowan took it to trial. So I think he'll be lucky to get out of this with anything less than 5 years. And I'm kind of not ashamed, but I do not know the extent of his criminal record, although he's got a significant add to it if he even had one. So a lot's going to come down to how the judge views his previous interactions with the law, if there has been any.
I read, too, and there was a victim impact statement at a previous trial, one of the ones you mentioned, where the executive director of the Morrisseau estate said that, quote, "The emotional devastation wrought by this decades-long crime is immeasurable. The forgery ring was a cultural crime that goes beyond financial losses, reaching into the very heart of Indigenous heritage." And you kind of touched on that as well, but it's hard to put into words just how big of a fraud this is.
Yeah, it's cruel, isn't it? I mean, a bunch of, let's face it, old white dudes in southern and northern Ontario capitalizing on a long dead Indigenous artist in order to line their own pockets. It's terrible. It's cultural appropriation. It's fraud. It's theft. And that's before you even get into the fact that well-meaning people who wanted to honor this man's legacy by hanging his art in wherever, in a gallery or in their house, got ripped off.
Yeah. Do you know if is there an effort underway to try to now find all these fakes and try to catalog what's out there and make sure we kind of know the extent of this?
It's going to be a really, really Herculean task. One of the quotes from the, and again, I'll confess, I like this guy, Paul Bremner. He said that a lot of the Morrisseau paintings were sold to settle bar tabs. So that could probably all you need to know where some of these fake art is in order to get a hold of it and destroy it, or at least tell the people who have it that it's fake.
Wow. All right. Peter, anything else we didn't cover tonight?
I think that's it. I am kind of interested to see if there's any charges maybe from investigations that might follow, but I have not gotten any indication of that. But I am going to be interested in the sentencing. It's a nonviolent crime, and we all know about our justice system, so
yeah,
be interesting.
Well, Peter, thanks so much for this. Keep up the great work. I read your coverage all the time. It's a real service you're doing there in Barrie.
Okay, thank you, guys.
He's one of the best.
Yeah.
He really is.
I love talking to Peter.
Just an old school scribe, down and dirty, rolling up the sleeves.
Yeah. And you know what? And again, I'm nostalgic about it because I spent so much time in courtrooms covering different trials. And I love it. I love the process. I love watching the justice system do its work. And he's totally right. The answer he gave about, these are actually likable people in a fraud trial because that's why they're so good at what they do. And we can say he's a fraudster because he's a convicted fraudster now. That's not an allegation. He's been convicted. And these people are charming, and that's how they do what they do. It's how they rip people off.
Yeah.
And I love how Peter captures that. And I would I can only just imagine the conversations in the hallways they would have had sometimes. And I said it already, but just the old school paparazziing of everybody coming out of the courtroom. That's my favorite. Sometimes I read his coverage just to see whose picture he took that day.
Good stuff. Also good stuff. Looking ahead to Friday, former Premier Dalton McGuinty.
Yes, that's right.
On the program.
Another high-profile former and/or current politician coming.
He's got a new book out.
Yes.
Started reading it on the weekend. It's
Did
fantastic.
You? Yeah, it's a good. About leadership.
Really it is all about leadership.
Is it making you a better leader?
Well, it's really
because I don't sense it yet.
It's really designed for people in politics about being good leaders in that realm, but a lot of it would apply to everyday.
I'm fascinated. I'm looking forward to talking because if that's the context of what he's talking about, the book. But I feel like we're past that age. We want political leaders now that are brash and outspoken and mean to people sometimes. And I don't know
if only we had some of those.
Yeah, I mean that's what I feel like. I feel like the advice that Dalton McGuinty's giving to people may not be relevant anymore, even though it is hugely relevant.
Yeah, that's going to be a good chat.
That's going to be one of my questions.
All right, Friday, Dalton McGuinty, right here on the program. That's it for us tonight. Closer look at villagemedia.ca, closerlookpodcast.ca is our website. As always, tonight's program produced by Derek Turner for Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for spending time with us tonight. Let's do it again tomorrow night at 7, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.